Welcome to If I Could Say One More Thing, the podcast where stories fill in the gaps of unfinished conversations. We all have words left unsaid, things we wish we had expressed, questions we never asked, or moments that ended without closure. Here, we bring those unspoken thoughts to life through storytelling, imagining the conversations that never happened, but perhaps should have. Each episode blends narratives and reflections, giving voice to what lingers in the silence. Because sometimes, even if we can't go back, we can still find meaning in the words we never got to say. Today's episode is about connection, disappearance, and the echoes of unfinished conversations. Evie once shared something special with Theo, a bond built through music and late-night conversations. Then, without warning, he was gone. Now Evie wonders what would happen if she reached out after all this time. Would he respond? And if he did, what would it change? Let's step into her story and find out. The first time Evie heard from Theo, she was curled up on her threadbare couch in her tiny apartment, her cello resting against the wall, its strings still humming from an evening of practice. A half-empty mug of tea sat forgotten on the side table, growing colder by the minute. A casualty of her relentless quest to perfect a passage that never quite sounded the way she wanted. She was scrolling mindlessly through her dating app, debating whether she should delete it altogether. Her past conversations had been lackluster at best, monosyllabic greetings, generic compliments, and the occasional borderline inappropriate pickup line. Then, Theo's message appeared. "Cello, huh? Tell me, are you a Yo-Yo Ma disciple or more of a two cellos rebel?" She smirked, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Finally, someone who didn't just write, "Hey." It was a message with thought, curiosity, even playfulness. It made her want to reply, not just out of politeness, but out of genuine interest. And that was rare. The first conversation turned into a nightly ritual of texting, sharing playlists, and arguing over which Beethoven symphony was the most emotionally destructive. Theo was a music engineer, working odd hours, obsessed with sound in all its forms. He could talk for hours about the way vinyl captured imperfections, or how a concert hall could shape the timbre of an instrument. He asked her why she only played at weddings and local cafes, why she hadn't recorded anything of her own. She deflected, half expecting him to let it go, but he didn't. He was relentless in the way only someone who truly believed in something could be. And then, one night, he dared her. 5 original pieces, 5 weeks. I'll be your first audience. No pressure, just pure creation. Let's see what happens. It was the kind of challenge that shouldn't have worked. Who was he to make demands? And yet she found herself agreeing, fingers already itching for her bow. She spent those weeks in a haze of late-night composing and frantic voice memos, sharing snippets with Theo, who responded with unfiltered enthusiasm and the occasional absurd meme to break up the intensity. At week 5, with a pounding heart, she sent him her audio of her final recordings. She could hardly believe she had made it this far. 5 original pieces in just 5 weeks. The challenge had been daunting at first, an almost laughable ambition, but here she was, proof that maybe, just maybe, she had always had this in her. Perhaps the only thing missing before was the reason to test herself, the push to cross that invisible threshold between playing it safe and daring to create. Theo's reply was short. Amazing, Evie, truly. And then, nothing. No follow-up, no acknowledgement of what those 5 weeks had meant to her. Just silence, vast and unbroken, stretching into days, then weeks. She composed and deleted texts, convinced that any second now his name would light up on her screen with an inside joke or a comment about the latest absurd piece of music theory he had stumbled upon. At first, she told herself he was busy, that life had simply gotten in the way. But as time passed, the absence solidified, leaving her to wonder if she had only been playing a duet that, to him, was always meant to be a solo. She wondered if she had misunderstood everything. Had she been the only one imagining the easy transition from texting to talking, from talking to meeting? Maybe she had mistaken enthusiasm for something more, weaving meaning into his words where there had been none. Eventually, she accepted the truth. He had friend-zoned her before he disappeared completely, and she had been foolish enough to believe otherwise. A digital ghosting of the most anticlimactic variety. No drama, no explanation. Just an absence where something promising had once been. But here was the kicker. Thanks to that stupid dare, she had stopped playing for weddings and started playing for herself. She sent her cello pieces to a dozen producers, expecting a silence or polite rejection. Instead, one of them wrote back, intrigued by the raw emotion in her compositions. He wasn't looking for a one-time collaboration. He was looking for someone who understood strings like she did. Before she could overthink it, she was sitting in an office, accepting a full-time position as one of the consultants for the strings department of a local production studio. Suddenly, music wasn't her side gig. It was her career. And now, a year later, she found herself staring at her phone, Theo's name still in her contacts, her thumb hovering over a message she hadn't written yet. She had spent months resenting his disappearance, wondering if she had been a fleeting amusement, a project he abandoned once completed. But as time passed, that bitterness faded, replaced by something unexpected. Gratitude. Because without Theo, without that ridiculous stare, she might still be playing background music for strangers instead of standing center stage. Her music filling rooms she never dreamed of entering. What would her life had looked like if she had never sent that first message? Would she have ever had the courage to take herself seriously? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. He had changed her life even if he never knew it. Did she owe him anything? Did she owe herself the closure of reaching out? Did she want to reopen a door that had been so definitively shut? Or was it better to leave the what if untouched, preserving it like a perfectly unresolved chord? She had spent enough time dissecting his absence, turning it over like a well-worn melody. But did she really need an answer, or just the illusion of one? She took a deep breath and typed 2 words and hesitated for a moment. Her heart pounded as she stared at the screen, daring herself once again to send that text. Maybe he would respond with the same playful wit that had once made her laugh out loud in the middle of the night. Maybe he wouldn't respond at all. Either way, it would be her one last note in the unfinished symphony of their connection. She closed her eyes and let those two little words she had just typed escape her lips, barely more than a breath. You win. And then she hit send. And that was Evie's story. Names have been changed for privacy reasons, but the emotions and questions remain real. But how does she feel after hearing it? Did it help her process her experience, or does it leave her with more questions than answers? And the biggest question of all, does she now plan to reach out to Theo? Let's hear what she has to say. Hello, Evie. Thanks for being here today. What inspired you to ask for this particular story to be written?
I think it was a mix of wanting to make sense of something unfinished and acknowledging how one seemingly, small interaction changed the course of my life. Meeting Theo, even briefly, set off a chain reaction that led me to take my music seriously. But at the same time, his sudden disappearance left me with this lingering, what if? And I guess I wanted to explore that through storytelling.
How did Theo's challenge change your relationship with music?
Well, before Theo, music was something I loved, but never truly claimed for myself. I played at weddings and cafes, but it was always in the background, literally and figuratively in the background. His challenge forced me to create with purpose, I guess, and not just as a hobby, but as something I could own. It was the first time I composed for myself, and that changed everything.
Do you think Theo ever understood the impact he had on you?
I doubt it. At least, not fully. I mean, he saw potential, and he encouraged me. But I don't think he realized that he was the push, that I needed to shift my entire life. And the irony is, he disappeared before he could ever see the outcome. I used to be bitter about that. But now I see it more as a strange kind of gift.
Now that you've heard the story play out, do you think you'll actually reach out to Theo?
That's a big question, isn't it? When I first asked for this story, I was trying to imagine what it would feel like, whether it would bring me closer or just open a door, I wasn't sure I wanted to step through. Hearing it now, though, I realized that maybe the act of imagining it was enough. Maybe I don't need a real life ending to this. I got what I needed, the realization that I don't regret any of it, even the way it ended, to be honest. So will I reach out? I honestly don't know. But I do know that I don't want his response to validate what I've gained from this experience. And that in itself feels kind of like an answer.
And if you could say one more thing to Theo, what would it be?
I think I'd tell him that what he did mattered. That even though he walked away, the impact of his words stayed. And maybe I'd also ask him, what was it all for? Did he ever wonder about me the way I wondered about him? But then again, maybe some questions are better left unsaid.
And that's where we leave today's story, between what was and what might have been. If this episode resonated with you, consider following the podcast and sharing it with someone who might see a piece of their own story in it. And if you carry words left unspoken, a conversation that lingers in the quiet spaces of your mind, I'd love to bring it to life through story. Send your request to SayOneMoreThingPod at gmail.com. I'm Andrea Applewick, and this is If I Could Say One More Thing.